everybody. We have, let's see, Marnie is present, Mr. Powell is not.
Okay.
Hi, Bob. So we have a full house.
Yes.
So you won't see any of the alternates. Do the alternates. Any additions or changes to the agenda, John?
I have none.
The minutes of January 27, 2025 were brought to my attention by Ingrid Wood that there was one modification to minutes. Her testimony on the third page under the paragraph that starts with her name, that the verbiage should say, she said the landmark parcel is the only parcel at this. We said intersection, she's asking it to be modified to be corrected and say corner intersection. With that change, I would make a motion that we accept the minutes as presented. Second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Noted. We have a public hearing continuation this evening. Just for the public, I would ask, we're gonna let the applicant make any presentation he would like. This is a continuation of our public hearing from our prior meeting session. And I'll ask the applicant to bring us up to date on any approvals to this point or anything that he wishes to enter in his testimony. Then I'll ask for a comment from our town planner. Then I'll open it up to the commission to ask any questions. Then I'll go back to the public and ask you to raise your hand and be recognized. And then I'll ask you to state your first and last name and your address for the record. And speak clearly because we do record each session. So with that said, I'm going to turn this over to you, Mr. Monroe.
My name is Jefferson Monroe. I'm the applicant and I'm resident at 544 Route 87 here in Columbia. In terms of updates, the Board of Health got back to us about the septic, and as far as I understand, we are approved moving forward. And John can kind of speak to that, I think. Otherwise, we were able to speak with the neighbors immediately to the north of the parcel, the Perez or
Iris.
Paris, yes, and the landlord of the property and John were able to meet and kind of discuss screening options to John's liking. So it sounds like he has no concerns about moving forward. And otherwise, we're just hoping to get approved tonight. So
Okay. John, any thoughts on that? Do we have definitive health department approval?
So we have there's a few conditions that Jefferson has to satisfy in terms of documentation, but they have approved in concept the change in use. So from a public health standpoint, that the commission's need for concurrence from the health district is satisfied.
Okay, but we need approval from them in order to proceed.
Right, and we have, I think we distributed that.
I see that was the reason, that's the reason why I asked the question. It seems like we didn't have approval, that it was approved in concept, but not absolutely.
Okay, let's I'll scroll up.
He said he didn't, I don't see any reason for denial of approval.
Right, so
approval, I just see no reason for denial, but that's different from formal approval.
so there is a document that's dated February 7th from the Eastern Highlands Health District, dated February 7th at the top, Harrison Walsh. PHR 2516, that's the application number. It's listed as an approval.
Yeah, it's headed as approval.
So it's conditions it will offer. It's basically limited menu of ready-to-eat meals. All food will be served exclusively in disposable containers to streamline service and minimize cleanup. It's important to note that the water usage for this kitchen will be significantly lower than that of the hair salon. So there are a few conditions, granted that the daily water use will be less than the salon.
I didn't want to give a letter, so this
Yeah.
is sufficient approval from your perspective.
Correct.
Okay.
And I would also just note, when Harrison, I'm not sorry, when Jefferson was just speaking about the discussion with the neighbor to the north, John Pyers, he said John, and I would just want to make sure that everyone's clear that he meant John Pyers, the neighbor, not John Guskowski, the town planner. So in this case, the Mr. Pyers, as the immediate abutter to the northwest technically, had expressed some concerns about the screening and the any potential odor mitigation. And Mr. Pyers and the building owner, whose name is Harrison, did meet and came to an agreement, which Jefferson submitted an email on that, that there was a meeting with the building owner and the Pyers. So basically the two building owners along the property line, and agreed to the removal of some trees, planting of arborvitae, and removal of the wood, I believe removal of the wood fence as well, and basically replacing the wood fence with a living arborvitae screen. And that met the abutting neighbors' concerns for long-term screening. And
a revised site plan.
we would have to require a revised site plan as part of a condition of approval, if that's the way you wanted to go.
What if what they proposed wasn't something that we felt was sufficient?
Well, then you would have the ability to increase that requirement if needed. I'm sorry, did I freeze up?
Well, we don't know exactly what was proposed at this point. So what if what was proposed that's depicted on a site plan doesn't meet with an acceptable criteria for the commission? If we gave conditional approval without having seen what was proposed, then
Yeah, I think that's a legitimate concern, or a legitimate question. I think, we could require that you spell out a number or a planting density separation distance between the individual arborvitae plants. But I don't know that the commission. Well, there is another. Well, let's point it out this way. Okay, there is another neighbor who has expressed some concern, and I believe is in the audience this evening, about both visual and odor buffering. I don't know that the commission itself has identified concerns, screening or buffering concerns beyond that of the neighbors. And if the most immediate neighbor is satisfied, I don't know on what grounds the commission might choose, based on available evidence and testimony, to substitute on their own behalf that would supersede that of the neighbor. But some additional detail would be useful, I imagine.
Those words to describe that scenario, John. Let's proceed with this. I would hope to have in writing exactly what proposed modifications to the site are planned, so that we can hold them up to that standard if in fact that's what the commission feels is necessary.
Rick, can I just make a quick comment on that? I think the best scenario that we're looking at is we've got two possible neighbors here working out the situation on their own. I don't know why we would want to get involved with that. Now, if it comes down to the commission, that's the agreement of the commission, but they seem to have come to an agreement, at least for that particular situation. Why would we want to?
Because there's absolutely no teeth to that agreement.
Right. So you would want to memorialize that that planting of the buffer as part of a condition of approval, certainly. So it wouldn't just be an informal agreement between the neighbors.
Okay, in general terms, to make sure that they follow their own agreement.
Well, first of all, there may be an agreement between the neighbors, but ultimately we have to be comfortable with this plan in that location with the buffer as it is or with as it's proposed. We would need all that documented in order to be able to properly evaluate it and understand it. If there's separate concerns on the part of the commission, separate from the neighbors' concerns, that's something that we haven't gotten to yet.
Right, yeah, we haven't
We're
gotten
in
that
data
point.
collection
Right.
mode right
Yeah,
now.
let's see how, let's see where
But
it
my
goes.
point is, I would be more comfortable with a formalized revised site plan detailing what changes are proposed for the site so that we know what's proposed and the property owner can be held up to performing under those circumstances. Otherwise, it becomes a very subjective exercise on the part of staff, and I don't want to put them in that position.
Excuse me, Rick. Rick, excuse me. Usually when people are describing plantings and buffers, there's a description of those plants, not just the species, arborvitae, but also the caliper of the plant, the height of the plant, and the spacing of the plants is usually described, not just saying there's an arborvitae buffer. So it's a little bit more specific that's required, I think.
Yes, thank you for. So that's just where we are. If there's an agreement, I'd love to see what that agreement is, and I would want it embodied in our approval and documented in the site plan. So that's my perspective on it. So at this point, John, you weighed in. Anything else you want? Because I'm going to open up to the commission.
No, not at this point.
Oh, thank you. Anything else, anything from the commission in terms of questions?
If I'm not seated, can I still ask questions?
Yes, you can.
Okay,
Yes, you can. Just the only restraint you would have is you couldn't, when we go into deliberations, when the public hearing is closed, if you're not seated at that point, then we can't have you participate in those discussions, but I appreciate you asking.
oh, very good. So I wasn't present at the last meeting, but did watch the YouTube video as well as reading minutes. And I do understand that this is something that's allowable, so long as there's no impact to the neighboring community. And it's just some issues that were brought up, I just want to ask for some clarification of.
Sure.
There were comments at the last meeting that this would be a high-intensity commercial application. From my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is a single food truck with a single serving window.
That's correct.
And about how many single individual customers do you get a day coming through there?
Currently, we get between 5 and 7 because it's February. We're projecting 40 to 50 per day over a 6-hour period. So, ideally 10 an hour.
Sure, and the majority of your business is just walk up and drive up. How much more would you anticipate with the in-store operation as well?
That's no additional. We were expecting it to be 40 to 50 people a day.
All right, so then just the additional traffic volume would be between 40 and 50 individual vehicles at the most coming out of there over the course of a business day.
That's correct, yeah.
And then looking at the concerns of risk of incident, traffic accidents, the dangerous corner. There's nothing about your business that would bring in more or less traffic than any other business that would go in there.
That is correct, yeah.
And then as far as the individual concerns about the odor coming through, your food truck, does it have a commercial range on it? And is there anything that's industry standard about that? For odor filtration or anything of that nature?
Basically, my understanding is that all events operate the same. It takes the vapors and it puts them out into the air, so.
What I have. Thank you.
Any other questions from the commission, comments? Let me open this up.
I have a quick one. I guess my question is this application, are we being asked to review an application for an extension of your farm operation or a restaurant? Because your references and the document that you submit today refer to this as being an extension of your farm. The application that we're reviewing refers to it as restaurant. The distinction to me is, once this is approved or denied, okay, but once it's approved and it's approved, is that the approval travels with the parcel, not the owner, not you. So if the next person that comes along wants to operate this, you sell it, you move on, is that person won't necessarily be a farmer or have it be an extension of your farm. So which is this? Is this an extension of your farm or is this a restaurant?
Well, I'm not sure if I understand the sort of thrust of your question within the context of the next owner. Like, I don't know what
The approval travels with the land, not with you. Okay, so once this is approved, this will be approved for a temporary quasi-permanent Robert's hired restaurant in the center of Columbia. And whoever it is that does it can do with what they want to do with it. So your point of this meeting, the plan of conservation and development, because it's a farm operation. I'm questioning that.
Well, all of the meat that's served out of this particular location comes either from my farm or other farms, and we try to use as much local product as necessary, so I feel like in terms of the zoning, it's a restaurant, that's what the application is, and the fact that it's an extension of my farm really doesn't have any bearing in that regard. However, in terms of using the mixed use area for a commercial kitchen, the fact that it is an extension of my farm seems applicable because of the planning document that you're referencing. So I feel like, while I understand what you're saying in terms of the fact that it's gonna be a restaurant, if I sell it to someone else or someone else goes in there, that's the case with almost any business. Like, I don't really understand what the bearing is on this specific piece.
Well, the bearing is that if it's, as you're referring to as an extension of your farm and farm operation. We have regulations on your farm that allow you to have service of vegetables, products that you produce on your farm, right on the premises on your farm. Not in the center of town, but on the premises of your farm. Have you pursued that option?
I don't know why that's like a question in this particular
Well,
space.
only because you've referred to it as an extension of your farm, and I'm curious why you didn't explore that option rather than do the center of town.
Well, the center of town is referred to in the planning document as a mixed use area. And as such, it's zoned for all of the things that the mixed use area has available, such as restaurants and stores and that sort of thing. Whereas the rural agricultural area that the farm is located in is not. So the location is helpful for us in terms of traffic flow, but also it just seemed like from a town perspective, it would make more sense to concentrate use in this area where there is more traffic and commercial activity in a building that's been a commercial building for 2 centuries.
Any other questions from the commission? We're gonna open this up to public comment or questions. Ms. Wood,
Perhaps I missed
will
this,
you
but,
state your name and address for the record?
oh, thank you. Ingrid Wood, 322 Route 87, just 2 doors down from 326. And I think you may have addressed this in your testimony last time. However, I have missed something. And that has to do with odor mitigation. Okay, so I'm going to start with something kind of specific, but during the month of December, late December, early January, my backyard smelled like fried cooking grease. And I'm 2 doors down, and I am concerned about odor mitigation among other things, because my backyard is basically my whole yard. And I walk out the door and I smell cooking grease. And I didn't smell that before this food truck appeared where the frying odors and the exhaust from that went into my yard, okay, and my neighbors' yards too. So the question was, what will be done? And I think the response we got last time is, well, yeah, during cold weather, you're going to smell cooking grease. Okay, now in Columbia, cold weather is November through the end of April. That's, 7 months. I really don't want to smell this in cold weather half the year. Something, if this is a restaurant and there will be food preparation and frying outside, and I don't know that it is a restaurant because John told me that it was not really a restaurant. However, Jeff has characterized it as a restaurant, so that's another question. But the question specifically is, what will be done to mitigate cooking odors? Because they will occur at least 6 months of the year, and that is not consistent with the residential community right next door to this operation. Okay, that's one question, and you may have an answer, but the response we got last time was, well, that's only going to occur during cold weather. 6 months of the year is not acceptable. Second question I have is, I can't figure out for the life of me what type of food operation this is. Is this a restaurant in the traditional sense? And apparently not. Or is it a food truck? So John Juskowski very kindly called me as a result of my confusion last week and said, well, it has the word truck. Truck is a vehicle. And there's very limited, jurisdiction over what goes on in a truck. And it doesn't have, real estate, so to speak. It can go anywhere, do anything, sell anything to anybody at any time. And I am not really concerned about what you're selling. I'm concerned about my house, the neighborhood, and I don't want to smell fast food cooking for 6 months or more of the year. And I don't want to have a lot of activity that didn't exist in a fast food operation. I don't know what kind of fast food operation is this. It's not a traditional restaurant where people eat inside. Is it an exterior restaurant of some sort? It's not defined. And there's no jurisdiction over it because it's a vehicle. And, my neighbors and I are very concerned about seeing it, hearing it, smelling it, the hours of operation, which we have been able to see, smell, and witness what's going on. And we don't want to do that. That's new. And even Chris Ram, in his email that's in this packet, says, yeah, this is an expanded use. It is different from what was there previously. And the previous restaurants, they weren't really restaurants, although one may have been, was a natural food store, which was self-contained. It didn't have an exterior component, and a bakery cafe, which was entirely self-contained. So there wasn't an outdoor component with seating or cooking or other types of activities. And that's new. Is that a restaurant? I don't know what it is, and I don't really have a definition for it, but it's different from what was there before, and I would ask that you please consider this because it's a new use. I don't know if my friend and my neighbor, John Pyers has additional comments, but, one concern we have is, where's the boundary? Where is the fence? Where's the mitigation? What exists there today is old, falling down, and frankly inadequate for a business, as I said last time, that could be very successful, by the way, and medium to high intensity with a lot of customers. all hours of the day. And, we'd like to see some kind of vegetation, a bigger fence, something that sets it apart from the neighborhood. But in the testimony, we're told there is no plan for any of this. And that is a huge concern to the residential houses right next door. So thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna give the applicant the opportunity to respond in any way that you might think is appropriate. And I'll do that as each person comments, so we don't get too far out of the way with comments and any reaction. You're not obligated to, but you're welcome to. And I appreciate you directing your comments to the commission. Thank you. Thank you for your comments.
Sure, for starters, I don't know if the commission needs me to clarify what the food service is gonna look like at this location. I feel like it's fairly clear in the documents, but if anybody needs, I'm happy to do that.
It's the idea. I'm comfortable with what was presented previously.
Okay, great. I would just respond by saying that, per the earlier discussion tonight, the immediate neighbor has been satisfied in terms of the plantings that were discussed when he met with the owner of the building. Additionally, I understand that it is cold from November to April. The period of time that I was referencing was the extreme cold that we had several weeks ago when it was in the single digits for about a week. And I would also just say that the food trailer was in operation during November as well as December. And so while I understand that the questioner can smell fryer oil occasionally, we were operating a month prior to when the odors apparently began to infiltrate her yard. So it is a different use, but it's one that has happened in that building before. It's been a restaurant, when you run a bakery, people can smell baked goods. When you run a restaurant, people can smell other things, whether it's roasted chicken or bacon or other things. And so, given the location that, were the photos that I sent over, made available to everybody? The trailer was moved there on this past Thursday. It was the first time we were able to use that space. So, with the screening from the building, the trailer won't be visible to either of the neighbors, and we believe that most of the odors are gonna get blown just down 66 as well, so.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from the public? Here, I see one
Yes.
hand raised by Harriet Durway.
Yes.
Is-
Hi, I'm Harriet Durway, 214 Route 66. I'd like to talk a little bit about the zoning regulations that Columbia has. In your zoning regulations, 6.2 talks about prohibited uses. When you look at 6.2.1, it talks about the use, occupancy, parking, storage of a trailer of any kind on a lot is prohibited. Correct me if I'm wrong, but a food truck, this is a trailer. It's a food trailer, which is prohibited for commercial use in that spot. 3.3.2 talks about restaurants, food services, including entertainment, patio dining, which I believe we're talking about picnic tables in the parking lot, and alcohol sales and drive-throughs are prohibited. Now, I realize it's a drive up, but it's really almost a drive-through when we talk about a trailer. So this really changes the use of that area dramatically. It also changes the look and the use of Columbia in a downtown close to a historical district. So I'm not sure a restaurant where you walk in and you sit down at a table and have food service is completely different than a food truck and picnic tables in a parking lot. So, this is a very, very different use. And is this really what we want in our center of town, in an area that's close to a historical district? I just want to address the commission on those points.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
if I might, the second regulation that Ms. Denway cited, she said 3.3.2, which
33.2. 33.2.
33, not 3.3.
No, 33.2.
33.2. 33.2 point. I'm sorry, 33.2 is the mixed use district, special permit uses. And what, I'm sorry, could you repeat what you were citing?
Let me go back to the zoning regulations then. 33.2, other permitted uses with special permit and approval, but point number 5, restaurants, food services, including entertainment, patio dining, and alcohol sales, drive-throughs are not prohibited. Again,
Right.
not permitted. Realize it's not a drive-through, but it is
Okay.
a commercial trailer.
But it's not a
The
drive.
other permitted uses with special permit approval, which includes food service.
And so if I might, Mr. Chair, just cite something that Ingrid had cited a conversation that she'd had with me that I think she misstated somewhat. That she had asked several questions about the existing permitting path for this operation and asked what the food truck regulations were. And I noted to her, as I believe I noted last time, that the town does not have a food truck regulation or ordinance. Many communities do have a, itinerant vendor license that can be, obtained through the Board of Selectmen or the police or something like that. The town doesn't have that. And so it was the decision of the ZEO, Savannah, and myself to allow this food truck, which is, as noted, a trailer, a vehicle, not a permanent thing, to be permitted to remain on site as Jefferson, as the applicant went through this special permit process, which is, what we would be doing to get someone in line with the regulations anyway. It is allowable in the mixed use district, as Ms. Denway noted, section 33.2 5, which is restaurants and food service. We don't have a definition of restaurant in the regulations, and so therefore we would use just a standard dictionary definition. And I think reasonable people can disagree that a restaurant includes a food truck with some seating and an indoor space, or would just be an indoor space. But this, in fact, this regulation 33.2.5 says restaurant and food services, plural, which is, I think, written broadly enough to encompass the sort of hybrid approach that Jefferson is proposing to take here. I don't think there's any question, even though the town hasn't necessarily seen something like this before, the regulations are clearly written broadly enough to allow this. And again, subject it to a special permit process, which is to say the commission can require any conditions of approval to ensure that public health, safety, and welfare are upheld. So I don't think there's any question that this is allowable under the regulations subject to the special permit review.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Ms. Durway, anything else?
I guess I don't agree with that, but it's also into what fits in the community of our center of town. There's historical homes and other things, churches, things like that, that really make a historical district, and it really dramatically changes the center of our town to a whole different feel and a whole different look. So I just want to address that and tell you that it's very different than what we've projected for the center of that town and the center of that area of town in the past.
Okay. Thank you very much. Anyone else from the, yes, sir.
Yeah, Brian O'Hara, at 373 Tobacco Street in Lebanon.
Hi.
Hi, and so as I said last time, and I know you don't want to hear about how good the fried chicken is, but as I said last time, Jefferson is very serious about buying lots of potatoes and other vegetables from us. And it really, I mean, we're talking about, a good amount of land goes to keep this guy into French fries and his sides and things at the restaurant, and, so I just wanted to make sure and reiterate that, you know, this is a great thing you got going here. You know, Jefferson, I've known him for years, he's in the farmer's market, he's a very kind man, he's not gonna offend neighbors, he's gonna do the best he can to help out, you know, the neighborhood, he's not looking to cause problems, obviously, great businessman. Obviously, it's real hard to keep a business going these days, especially a restaurant, and I just wanted to reiterate that, you know, what you have here is you've got a guy raising the chickens, pork, you know, he's bringing in vegetables from our place, and selling them right here in your town with a talented businessman providing extremely high quality food. I know, you know, he's not got a great amount of people coming through yet, but it's gonna catch on. You know, the other restaurants failed. It's not easy, but you've got a chance here to have a really high quality restaurant, you know, with our goods right in your center of your town. Very kind man. So hopefully that'll all.
Thank you for your comments.
Yeah.
Any other comments from the public? Anyone online? I don't see any hands raised. Okay. With that said, I'm gonna come back to the commission. What is, and I do want to make note for the record, Mr. Tabor, you weren't seated at our last public hearing session. Have you reviewed the video and the audio and the written transcript?
Yeah.
Is anyone else seated tonight? That
I
wasn't-
did as well. I
You
watched
did?
the whole hour and 22 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
And Rick, I as well reviewed the minutes and the audio from the last
Okay.
meeting.
Thank you. I did want to get that on the record.
Yep.
Thank you, Bob. With that said, are you at a point where you're comfortable closing the public hearing? Commission, that's a question to the
Yeah.
commission in general.
Yes.
I'll make a motion that we close this public hearing.
I'll second.
Second, any discussion? Those in favor? That would be unanimous. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So the next up is a subdivision application of Charlie Dutch and Dutch and Associates and Isaiah Chwanek for a subdivision at Old Willamanic Road, map 10, lot 27, zone RA, lot area 7.89. Really, what we're here to do is to just schedule the public hearing. There's not much that you're welcome to say whatever you would
No.
like, but.
This is, I'm sorry, this is the opening of the public hearing. You received it 2 weeks ago.
Oh, I apologize. My mistake. Okay, that being said, the applicant, are you the applicant, sir?
I am,
Yes, please feel free. Identify yourself for the record if you could.
yes. Charles Dutch, principal with Dutch and Associates, and the applicant this evening. Do we have a map reference here? Do you have small ones?
You would have brought that.
Oh, okay, all right. Okay. Well, we'll see if I need it. So what we've got is a 3-lot subdivision. All the lots are fronted on the town road. We've been through wetlands. We didn't have any issues there. We did have a roadside ditch that we needed because it was classified as wetlands. But it's hardly on the property, but it's done. It's a drainage system for the town road. We've done the soil testing. I have not heard from the health department yet as far as them. I don't know what their procedure would be. But I have not gotten a approval letter. Maybe the town planner could help us with that, I don't know. It's an open lot. Right now. There was some wetlands involved in the corner, we didn't get near it or anything, it's subject to. 2 easements. One for the Algonquin Gas and the other for one of the power utility companies. And I'm try to answer questions.
Is that the easement there?
That's one of them, and there's one.
Oh.
Between there and
Okay.
If it was any smaller, I'd have to go west.
Rick,
Yes,
okay, for me, ask questions?
Joe, yes, please go.
So, because of my advanced age, I can't read the small print. Are the soils very good?
Yes, there were, if you like the larger one to look at.
Sure. So you're looking at some design stuff.
Yes.
Anybody else want to see this? Rick, would anybody else want to see this?
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, for people online and people in the room, if you want, I put the site plan up on the screen. Please let me know if you can see that.
It's currently a hayfield. The hayfield, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
So when you put the driveways in, you have to do a culvert and the.
Yes. I met with the road superintendent. We're in line with what she wants done.
Okay.
Right, excuse me, I don't know if everyone's just gone perfectly silent, but we're not getting any audio at all from the room.
Well, we're here.
It's been
Okay.
perfectly quiet.
Okay, that was disturbing. Thank you.
Just absorbing the entirety of the plan.
Reading, introduced copies of that.
John, it's been such a long time since we've had this kind of subdivision proposal. Normally, we
Sure.
would be given 11 by 17 copies. That's part of our submission criteria. Multiple 11 by 17.
Okay,
Or am I
I'm
mistaken?
yeah, I'm not sure. I don't want to throw Mary Kay under the bus. I wasn't aware of the actual. I've seen the big copies of the site plan in the office. I didn't see any reduced. I don't know if they were dropped off or not.
Okay,
I don't remember the 17s. I do remember larger ones.
okay.
It's pretty basic.
Yeah.
Lots.
Yeah, so.
I-
Yeah, it's
so-
pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
It's yeah. From if I might, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
So just yeah, as I think as I was hearing Walt say, yeah, from my perspective, this is as straightforward as an administrative subdivision application as you can get. It's, there's 3 lots of more than the minimum acreage and more than the minimum frontage required for the zone. So these are all frontage lots. There is no, they're all being served by private driveways. There are no shared facilities. There is no, public improvements that need to be made. And as a subdivision of less than 5 lots, it is not required to set, I'm sorry, of less than, I think it's less than 10 acres, actually, I think. It does not have to provide any on-site open space. So it's basically, they did this, the requisite soil testing and engineering design to demonstrate that 3 new residential lots are feasible on this property. But it doesn't need to be any more complicated than that.
Excuse me, John, I have a question.
Yes, go ahead, Bob.
John, as part of our subdivision requirements, aren't we required to have a A2 survey submitted?
Yes, is this not certified?
I don't know.
A2?
I can't read the fine print, so I don't know if it is.
Okay, yeah, let me, well, I mean, Mr. Dutch, can you tell us if this has been certified as an A2?
Yes, it is.
So I can zoom in on the survey notes. Let's see. Yeah, I'm sorry, if you can see
Okay,
that, Bob,
yes.
right here conforms to A2 standards.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry, John, I couldn't read that. Thank you very much.
Okay, any questions from the commission? Bob, any questions?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Okay,
Nice straight road, no sightline issues.
okay. If there's no other questions, I'm gonna make a motion. We close the public hearing.
I'll second.
Yes.
Oh, any discussion?
No.
All those in favor?
Aye.
That would be unanimous. Yes. Okay. We'll move into old business. Bear with me. Wow, it's Saturday lights for tonight.
Yes.
Anything under audience of citizens that anyone would like to bring up that isn't already on the agenda tonight? Okay. Under unfinished business, we have the special permit application for a change of use for 326 Route 87. The addition of a new restaurant use. The applicant is Jefferson Monroe Gardens of Our Descent Farm LLC. Excuse me, please. All right. Doing business as The Good Farm, owner Savvy ROI LLC and Chen Family Investments LLC. Map 17, lot 47, zone M, lot area 0.79 acres, section 52.7. So that said, everyone, what is your pleasure?
This is the appropriate time for us to have a discussion.
Yeah. Yep. Yes, and it's limited to just the seated commission members.
So what I'm hearing, and I'm trying to be sensitive, I'm sensitive to, we're trying to bring business into town, pay taxes, that type of thing. But I'm also sensitive to what the neighbors want. And the biggest complaint that I hear is the smell. Is there any way, I mean, I don't know the business, is there any way to mitigate the smell?
Well, just looking at the history of the building, and that isn't necessarily pertinent to the current application, this is from my own experience. There was a very busy restaurant, their breakfast place going back 30 years. I would guess that any odors that they vented were vented through the roof, through the structure out at roof level, as opposed to any odors being vented at ground level. And that may be the source of some of the irritation of the neighbors. I don't know that. I was just trying to gather information when we were in public hearing mode. So that being said, there may be some way to mitigate it with a longer stack exhausting from the odors from the trailer. I don't know, I haven't gotten into that. You know. And my biggest concern at this point, well, I would be concerned about the odors, and I appreciate that you brought it up, I don't know what you thought, but. My concern is the lack of any documentation of buffering. Because I've heard about a lot of buffering that's been proposed over the years that just never showed up.
Well, we could make, if we were gonna approve it, could we approve it with the condition that we get to see the buffering plan first before it's implemented?
We could,
And I don't know if they put up a line of arborvitae's, I don't know if that will help. No,
Well, that's the other thing.
What we can't do is affect the approval though. So once we approve it with conditions or otherwise, it's approved.
we can
So it's very
delegate,
hard to enforce.
we can delegate the review and approval of that to our staff. And I'd be somewhat to very comfortable with that, I certainly trust them both, they're wonderful. But I wish that was presented to us, we were presented with an old site plan with a simple trailer drawn on it. Not knowing what all the comments on the site plan that was presented, whether they were current comments or old ones from prior applications that may or may not have changed over time. It was very challenging. And I'd like to address all the questions that were brought up from the public about the legitimacy of this kind of application. I'd really like us to talk through them because this is the only time we have to do it. It's,
so they're operating as a business today, but they're not operating the kitchen part.
correct.
So if we were to delay this, to answer your questions and maybe mine, a month, is that gonna materially affect their business?
Good question.
Well, and here's the challenge is, so that if the neighbors have come to a preliminary agreement on buffering. My issue with that is if we want to memorialize that and say that there's a condition, if we approve, there's a condition that zoning enforcement or whoever needs to confirm that both parties are satisfied with the buffering. Like, how would we do that without prescribing what we would want to do that?
I would propose that we're satisfied with the buffering.
We have to be.
I would
And
propose,
frankly, you said that you heard that they're preliminarily okay with it, but I didn't hear Mrs. Wood feel anywhere near okay with it. And she's one of those people. I mean, I get that one of them has been talked to, but I don't think anybody's made an effort with Mrs. Wood to come up with a buffer.
Justin, what you just said, that the neighbors be okay with it, I would want to know that. But I would want us to be okay with it as a commission from a very objective perspective, not necessarily the neighbor's perspective. Is the buffering in place there that we can document on the site plan such that we're comfortable long-term with it, separate from everything that the neighbors would be considering? And I think we'd be making a mistake to just simply take the neighbor being satisfied with what was stated is sufficient.
I understand that, so let's look at this practically, systematically, so they're ultimately gonna be the ones putting up whatever buffering is being put up under whoever's supervision.
The property owner.
Correct, and the ultimate goal of that is to have an agreement between the neighbors that protect both neighbors' interests, okay? So maybe I'm not understanding you, I'm not even saying.
I'm not sure
disagree.
that's even correct. I don't think we can ask, we can't force neighbors into business together.
That's not what
I
I'm
mean,
saying,
no,
but.
just hear me out though, but if they have a proposed plan
Correct,
and we can be good with it, because we're the enforcing agency,
right,
that's really the important thing.
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
What I'm saying is that so hear me out on that.
Yeah.
You have the two neighbors who are working on a mutually agreeable solution to a concern. My concern would be, we are not. If we're trying to protect the neighbors, why would we come up with a plan and why would we not lean on them to come up with a plan and just make sure that it's enforced? Because we're not experts on that, we're not experts on the.
We may fall back to doing.
Well, that
just
should be the default, as far as I'm concerned, so here's the other thing, guys, we need to understand that when we do this. And we create a condition, we are soliciting an expense. So we need to be cognizant of that. So the investment in that expense for the applicant or the landowner needs to be reasonable. And I think the most the best way to judge the reasonableness of that expense is that if it's agreeable between the neighbors who are actually having the issue, not us arbitrarily giving them an assignment to put up a barrier that they may or may not agree to.
Excuse me, Rick, excuse me,
Yes?
Rick? One of the things that concerns me is we've really not heard from the building owner, who's one half of the agreement. We've heard third hand or second hand that the building owner has agreed to this. So, you know, the applicant has made references to the building owner, but the agreement has to be between the building owner and the neighbor. And we haven't heard from the building owner, either in writing or verbally or anything. We've just heard secondhand from the applicant that the building owner agrees to it. So I don't think that holds up.
I think the big problem is that this hasn't been developed during the public hearing so that we have the information to vote on. That's a legitimate problem. Because all we can do is speculate on what the amendment will be, or what will be done. That should have been done in a form of a proposed plan that we could approve as part of the application. So that's a deficiency.
We've had this happen before with with subdivision applications, with commercial applications. We've always addressed buffers, especially when it's, you know, a commercial venture abutting a residential area or we've always had buffers shown on plans and the description of the buffers. So I think it's really important to have something on the plan that shows this, as you said, memorializes this, so that we can hold their feet to the fire if it doesn't get done. Just some verbal description about something by the applicant during a public hearing isn't legal. It's got to be memorialized. We have to vote on something that is tangible.
I do think we have a small window here. It would have been probably more prudent to hold open the public hearing if we want to see detail, but we can certainly request that the applicant provide detailed information about what this proposed agreement that we thought in concept was acceptable to allow us to close the public hearing. But I would like to see documentation for the commission to review.
I don't disagree with that. I just, I don't like extending these more than we need to for the applicant and for the neighbors, so that we have the information. I'm not disagreeing with you. I can see your face. I'm not disagreeing with you, but
we're not extending it. They didn't provide the data.
Right, and I'm, okay.
And he did say that he's in the slowest time of this year. He's got 5 customers, maybe a day, he said, right now.
Yeah, and I can imagine why, I can imagine some legitimate reasons why they would have come to the application without that buffer in place. I can think of some very legitimate reasons why, but if the commission sees fit to approve it with some conditions on exactly what that buffer will be, I just would rather see their plan than us dictating.
Absolutely.
I'll
Absolutely.
agree with you on that.
Yeah, that's really my only point, because I don't want us to step into a situation where we're making judgments on what should be there without being the experts of what's there.
Because we don't have a standard on it in our regulations, frankly.
Right, it's subjective to some point anyway. So when I look at, okay, well, what would a reason why you wouldn't need a buffer? Well, because the trailer where the cooking is gonna happen is below grade with a building and a fence between them and the neighbors on that side. That could be a reason why. Now, if it would have been nice to ask the public too, I guess, when Rick, considering your comment, as far as what is the issue and what is the satisfaction to the issue? If it's an odor, how on earth is a vegetation buffer going to stop an odor? So at some point, is anyone ever going to be satisfied with any sort of buffer, short of the business just not being there? So I think we need to consider that as well, as far how far does that go? So that's why I would rather them come up with a plan, so that it's mutually.
That's actually a really good point for us to jump off on. And let's talk about the fact that we're supposed to be reviewing applications that are compatible with the residential district. So we really need to be there too. So if we're looking at an application for a proposed operation that isn't compatible with the neighbors because the odors, because then
Yeah,
that's another whole other reason to evaluate.
I want to backtrack backtrack on one point, and this is more to illustrate a concept than to get specific here. Let's say that the proposed buffer was white pines. Well, they're notorious for not providing any real buffer, number one, and number two, breaking and shattering over time. And so even if the neighbors agreed that white pines were acceptable, we as a commission might say, no, we're looking for something more substantial as a buffer, so that it has some potential to last a long period of time. So yes, I want to defer to what they agree to, but it also has to make long-term sense for the property. So I don't want to arbitrarily come up with something, but they proposed arborvitae's. That would be my ideal solution
Yeah,
there.
if that would be my ideal solution, if that's their agreed upon solution for
But I
sure.
would like to see that documented, and they can't go anywhere until we review it anyway, so in this case, I think there's two issues here, or maybe three, if I can summarize, until, I don't mean to cut off any conversation. Number one, what is the proposed buffer and what is the agreement and who is it between? Number two, with regard to the location of the trailer, is going to be different than it has been in the past. It's gonna have the building between the trailer and the abutting neighbor that I think has the most concern. So that's with regard to odors. The idea, is it even appropriate to have cooking in a low slung exhaust pipe coming out of a trailer? If they do have an exhaust pipe in that location, that's a valid consideration for all of us, and I don't have a perspective at this point on that. And the other question is the legitimacy of us giving a permit to something we don't really quite identify in our regs. From my perspective, I think we're permitting the structure use, and then this is an auxiliary to that.
It's not a structure.
Pardon me?
Excuse me, Rick, excuse me, don't forget the subject, the item that Walt brought up is this a restaurant application or an extension of a farm application?
I don't see anything in the application that indicates that it's an extension of a farm application, unless I'm misremembering something.
Yeah, no, this is, Mr. Chair.
You did, but the application itself is for John.
Yeah, no, yeah, Mr. Chair, this is a restaurant or food service application. Or I'd say that the applicant did put in some supplementary information to address the special permit criteria, and did make some mention of the fact that there was a link between the food service and a farm operation to demonstrate that the value of this operation reflected community agricultural support values. But the land use application is for restaurant and food service in this location.
I think it was that context, the way I understand it.
Yeah.
Can I talk somewhere along it?
Oh, yeah.
Couple things keep coming to my mind. What happens if he sells this business? Go on down the line, and the person who gets it isn't quite is whatever, as this guy is. And I keep thinking that the owner of the property should be more involved in this process than this guy. Because that is the property we're dealing with, not the business.
Right, and so, sorry.
No, I just feel that we should, I would like, to me, this application should have almost come from the owner of that property.
He applies as the agent for the owner.
Huh?
He has permission to apply as an
So
agent.
the owner did submit and sign the application. And I would just note that both, this wasn't submitted, I think, for the record because it was an informal email, but both the applicant Jefferson and myself on the record that this evening's public hearing did reference a conversation between Harrison Walsh, the owner of the landmark property, and John Pyers, the immediate neighbor, where they did come to an agreement about the removal of some trees on Mr. Pyers' property, the removal of the existing wood fence, and the installation of an arborvitae screen. That was stated on the record. So it was the owner. The owner did agree with the abutter on what they both believe to be a suitable screen.
What happens to someone and what the owner of the property wakes up and says, I don't like that where that truck is located, and he moves it? What's our,
If the
Enforcement.
owner of the property moves the tenant's trailer,
yeah. And, you know, it just, I'm gonna move to the other side of the lot.
Or vice versa. What if the
well,
tenant
then
decides to move?
they would be out of compliance with the application.
I understand that, but we're kind of a mess that we got ourselves into.
Yeah, but the application shows it in one spot.
You know, I understand that too.
But the fact that it's portable is actually the mechanism that he's talking about.
Well, I understand, but the application is in one spot. I mean,
just one at a time.
No, it's just, you know, I mean, it's very nice you say that you can't do that, we want to move it back, and the guy goes. Not moving it back.
yeah, but I mean, you could do that with a number of things that we would approve.
I just feel it's easier with something as portable as this trailer. That's all, just a
No,
comment, just what's going through my head.
Well, I would look at this application as an application for that trailer in that location.
Right.
If they're out of compliance, that becomes an enforcement issue.
Okay, no, I know, I just think, it just seems easier to violate this agreement than many, that's all.
Well, I don't think we've addressed the odor issue, but I would like to see the proposed planning schedule in detail on the proposed arborvitae's. And I would suggest that we continue this public hearing for 2 more weeks until, and just have the applicant provide more detail on the already testified information.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
you've closed the hearing.
Yes.
we closed the public hearing. I'm just saying our deliberations, I'm sorry, I misspoke. But I would propose that we continue our discussion of this application and look for supplemental data, if it's legally permissible.
John, you made a comment of their comments about the buffer being on the record. Can you just clarify that for me as far as what legal weight that holds or does not hold?
Well, I would say it's on the record insofar as I was reading from a copy of the email that I received today. I stated that during the public hearing process. So if you have a transcript of the meeting and Mary Kay's minutes, that would reflect that I represented awareness of this conversation between Harrison Walsh, the owner of Landmark, and John Pyers, the abutting property owner, about those 3 elements: removal of trees on Pyers property, removal of the wood fence, and planting of an arborvitae screen. That was that is essentially the extent of the agreement. There was no drawings that were associated with that email agreement. So that's what I mean by on the record, is that I represented it during the public hearing process.
Does that mean that it's part of the application?
I would say not formally, because no supplemental information was submitted by the applicant. But I would say that the substance of that agreement, which is to say the planting of an arborvitae buffer, should certainly be a condition of approval if this commission was inclined to approve.
That was my next question. If we were to approve it with the condition of that, what's in writing currently and on the record being fulfilled, would that satisfy the commission?
Wouldn't satisfy me,
Why?
because I want to see what the planting schedule is, what the caliper of the trees are, and the species of the trees identified in written documentation, so that it's on written record, so it's enforceable in case it's never planted, or in case it dies out and the neighbors insist that it be restored to stay in compliance with any potential approval.
So you'd be satisfied if they memorialize that within the application as a written plan,
As a proposal to
as a
us.
proposal to us?
As a proposal to us, that's the only enforcement mechanism that's valid.
Well, I don't think that's the case, because it's on the record now that they would put a buffer in. I understand it doesn't meet the detail that you
Yeah,
want.
2-inch
but it's still
arborvitae's every
enforceable.
10 feet, 2-inch, 2 foot tall arborvitae's every 10 feet won't do anything.
Okay, I understand.
So
There's
what
a-
we could do, so again, you are not able to at this point receive a revised proposal from the applicant because the hearing is closed. You could if you had your own sense of what an appropriate density of, and again, I would stick with arborvitae because that is what both property owners seem okay with. If you had in mind an appropriate density and caliper, or planting height, let's say, because the arborvitae is a bush, not really a tree, would be appropriate, so 6 foot tall arborvitaes planted, no more than 4 feet apart or something like that, or a staggered 2 rows or something like that. That's something that if you wanted to continue your discussions, you could direct staff to draft an appropriate condition of approval that would satisfy that density. And it would allow, myself and Savannah to have a conversation with, a landscape architect or a reputable arborist to just make sure that we are getting that language correct and come back with you to
They'd
that
be comfortable
recommendation.
with 6 foot arborvitaes on 4 foot intervals. Along the area that has been described as the area needing buffering. I'd be very comfortable with that.
Yeah, Rick, I think we need to, as John referenced, I think we need to get to somebody who's a little bit more versed than we are in this stuff. Whether it's some kind of landscape contractor or landscape designer or something like that. That'll tell us that, yes, 6 feet's fine, but what's the interval? Is it 2 feet? Is it 4 feet? Or is it whatever? So.
Years ago, I planted 6 foot arborvitaes at 4 foot intervals on the side of my property, and it filled in beautifully.
Okay.
Just not an arborvitae expert. Like, this is where I have problems with this. Like, I don't know what to tell him to put up for arborvitaes, and I'm,
Well, I think Tom said the right thing, though, should stagger them slightly, so that when they do grow up, they're not too close together.
You're right. Does anybody here have a problem with the fact that we're discussing an application or discussing the approval of an application for a use that's not in our regulation?
no,
No, and just bear with me. John, you said several times tonight, John, I heard your words. You said we do not have regulation for this.
You don't have regulations for placement of food trucks on a temporary basis. You only listened to the first few things that I said, Walt. The regulation 3325 says restaurant and food services. How is this not restaurant or food service?
John, you said we don't have regulation for food trucks. Do we have regulations for food trailers?
No.
Okay, if we don't, then we have a regulation that says that we cannot approve it.
no. Because
How is it, Walt, tell me how this is, Walt, tell me how this is not food service.
Could we all agree for a moment that this is a somewhat subjective issue and it should be reflected in our vote? Individual
I'm
vote
fine
on
with
this.
I'm fine with that.
I don't think we have a description here that's absolutely definitive, but do we have enough leeway within our regulations to make a judgment? Is everyone comfortable with that perspective?
I think so too.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get back to the buffer and the odors. I'm comfortable with the application going forward. Given that the building itself is somewhat of a buffer from the food truck when it was located at the rear of the building. Now it's on the side of the building on Route 66, which is a busy traffic corridor. There's a lot of air movement there. I have a lot of concern for the neighbors. I've bent over backwards about residential uses adjacent to commercial uses in the past. There has been a restaurant in this location in the past. I don't think that bears on this application, other than the fact that I think a restaurant use in this location is appropriate, counter to maybe some members of the public. And my concern is the buffer and the documentation of it. And I don't think we need to bring in an arborvitae expert, but I would like, I'm even comfortable delegating a review and approval of an arborvitae buffer subject to what we discussed in this meeting and letting our staff give final approval. And if we could craft an amendment to the approval to reflect that, If we're going to approve it, subject to the buffer, then we might as well approve it now and let them go about their business.
One more thing, Rick. I think one of the members of the public, I forgot who she was, referenced a section in the zoning regulations about trailers. And I don't know, John, you didn't address that, did you?
Was that Harriet Durway referencing?
I can speak to that if you want, John, because I was looking that up as she was speaking. So
Go ahead.
we don't, as John said, we don't have any specific wording saying food trailer. However, trailers can be permitted on properties as long as they meet the setbacks. That's in, I think it's section 66. So the section she referenced was about 6.2. And then I believe it's, I'm sorry, I'm trying to find the section. I think it's 66 where we get more specific about trailer regulations, but they are allowed to stay on properties. As long as they
Okay.
And the other thing I would note relative to that is that, again, this is a special permit process, and if what the proposal is to essentially leave that trailer there in place for an extended period of time, such that we would basically consider it a permanent structure, because it's meant to be, tied into the building in a more or less permanent way, which would make it subject to all of the structural stuff that the zoning covers.
So does it conform to our setbacks if it was located there permanently? I think not.
I think it depends on how you consider the wing that is essentially a high retaining wall. If that, which is part of the structure of the building, it's within that footprint of the existing building.
I don't consider a retaining wall part of the structure of a building.
And it's not one of the structures defined in our regulations either.
And just get on record, what are you saying? What, this is
I
a wall?
said retaining walls and stone walls are not defined as structures in our regulations, so it can't be considered.
Yeah, I don't
It
look at it
doesn't meet
that
the
way, John.
setback requirements. You said, John, when we just discussed this last, that because it's on wheels, it doesn't need to. Well, that's the whole point that I'm trying to make about the portable, semi-portable, transportable, trailer, truck, whatever, as it was discussed a few minutes ago. Why that needs to be regulated, not for the purpose of denying it, but for the purpose of allowing it so that it's allowed correctly.
Right. Well, we're talking sort of a little bit about two different things. One is we don't, as Savannah and I discussed, don't have a regulation specific to food trucks or food trailers. It's just not covered. That doesn't mean necessarily it's not allowed. That just means that trailers and a food truck or food trailer is, generally speaking, a more transient use that is sort of not considered a permanent land use. The other component of this is that it clearly does fall within the special permit review process of restaurants and food services, which is, again, the subject to the special permit review, which includes appropriate conditions. And as far as the structures, and I think I probably, I'm muddling my words somewhat when I'm referring to its sort of permanent status versus the fact that it is a trailer and movable, would not require the same structural setbacks if it were a permanent building.
Well, because it's going to be attached by permanent wiring, especially we know, I would consider it an extension of the current building. And if it's covered under the food service regulation, then it's clearly in my mind, and this has only evolved as we've had this discussion, has to conform with the setbacks from the road. You don't get it both ways. You get it one way or the other, but you don't get it both ways. So I would look for documentation of that. And if we've closed the public hearing and we've done it prematurely, maybe the thing to do is to deny this, but allow them to reapply without prejudice with no application fee.
What did he apply under, John? Was there any consideration that it was a permanent structure, the trailer? Because as I understand it, they're putting an outlet with an extension cord to connect it, so it doesn't have to run it off a generator.
Then it's a trailer.
Well,
No, it's a trailer. If it's not permanently installed as part of the food service application, then it's just a trailer on the property. And then based on that, is it even permitted to be there?
Well, I think the intent of 6.1 is not the same as what this application is. When we talk about trailers, they're talking about more traditional trailers. This is a food service,
Well,
which is not.
I don't know how you get to go back and forth between the definitions to the least problematic one for the applicant. It's one way or the other.
So
It's as close to drive up, drive through as it can be,
Yeah, but it's not technically a drive. You can't say it's a drive
Well,
through.
because you can't drive through it.
But guys, here's the thing.
Drive up. to
yeah,
the
no,
window.
it's clearly not a drive-through. Drive-through is you order it, you know, you're in your car the whole time, you order at a window, you pull forward and you get your order. This is clearly not a drive-through.
Listen, we have a tendency to get myopic with this sometimes. I understand that there's always an impact to anything. And part of what we need to do is discern what that impact will be and what a reasonable condition will be. We've already discussed that. We're looking at a situation where he's already in business there.
Because they gave him a temporary permit while he's in application.
I'm not talking about the permit. I'm talking about
That's what
the
they
use.
said.
The business, he's already doing business there. And I'm
Because they gave him a permit temporary, right, wrong, or indifferent.
Please don't talk.
I'm not using that as an example as to any issue with the permit. Where he's proposing this is an eye shot of here, an earshot of here. You have the town hall complex, you've got the library, you have two churches with church bells. You have a town green that does concerts throughout the summer. You have a 4th of July parade, you have a post office, you have a Collins garage, which apparently isn't being used right now, but is traditionally a garage. You have an ex-bank that's now empty, so we've got two businesses in the mixed-use district that are not doing business. I dropped my kids off to Horace Porter on a 2-hour delay last week from snow, because of snow, and they were back down past the senior center, which is also another thing that's there. And then behind all of these residential areas is a cemetery where they have funerals. I'm sorry. When we talk about this particular situation with that trailer below grade next to that wall, with a building between him and the neighbors and a current fence, I don't necessarily think that Twin Peaks is going to set everyone in the mixed use district over the edge and create a bunch of chaos. So here's what, and I'll shut up, okay? But here's what I would like. I think if there's a reasonable proposal for a buffer, which we could have a whole nother debate on what that's gonna stop, or if it'll actually, satisfy anyone's needs. If it can be worked out with them and there's a reasonable buffer, fine. But we need to understand that when we do that, we're soliciting expenses on the applicant and the landowner. And I don't think he's individually wealthy. Okay, so he needs to do business, he needs to run a business. And I think that this is perfectly reasonable for him to be doing this. So the commission can, go in whatever direction we think is appropriate. I'm sorry, but that's basically how I feel when I look at everything in its totality.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
may I clarify
John?
just a quick thing? So I put on the
Sure.
screen, hopefully people can see this. This is the lower level of the landmark. Right here is the area of retaining wall where the the sort of final location of Jefferson's food truck that will be in conjunction with this portion of the building would be located. I just want you to note that the upper part of this retaining wall that my cursor is on right now, if you can see that, if you follow it around, it is at the level of the top of this door, which is higher than 6 feet tall. And contra to what Mr. Tabor noted, and did you switch over to are you still seeing the map or do you see the regulations?
regulations.
Regulations right here, structure, as using these regulations, structures shall include but are not limited to, and then it goes on, fences or walls greater than 6 feet in height. That is a wall greater than 6 feet in height. It is a structure. The new food service trailer is going inside that, the footprint that extends out towards the road.
Understood, John. Just to give you a little background, some towns will look at a non-conforming setback of a structure. So let's assume that that wall area is in fact a structure. We have never typically allowed somebody to continue or extend that non-conforming use if it doesn't conform with side yard setbacks. Other towns look at any intrusion into the non-conformity area could be extended along that non-conforming boundary line. We've never looked at it that way in Columbia. That's something that varies greatly by town. That said, my concern is the buffer primarily. It's been offered. I'd like to see it documented. I'm comfortable with the definition that I can come up with, but if you don't think my experience is sufficient, okay. I defer to a sign off by either you or Savannah as being an adequate buffer for the neighbor. I don't want to hold this up over that one issue.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking for some consensus here, I'm kind of in the same boat. I'd like to see this thing voted on, potentially approved, subject to staff approving the buffer.
You know, as far as the trailer, the cooking trailer, that's gonna be connected by an extension cord, so I almost don't consider that part of this application per se. I'm concerned about its impact, but as long as it's a trailer and can we permit it? I would treat it as an accessory to the food service use that's in the building proper. And that unfortunately doesn't give us the ability to address the impact on the neighbors odor wise, but in that location, I don't have the same concern I would as if it were behind the building. So my big concern here is the buffer, and I would suggest that we probably move to approval of this, subject to documentation of a buffer acceptable to our town planner or town zoning enforcement.
Excuse me,
officer.
one more thing, Rick, excuse me. I did not get a copy of the plan. Is the food truck location, the currently proposed food truck location shown on a document?
Yes,
Yes.
It is, okay,
yes.
okay,
And
thanks.
it has a little drawn in area there that depicts the shape of the food truck. It's
Okay.
got 5 sides to it.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Chair?
One other thing quickly, I'm hearing from the public that the biggest problem is this food smell. Do they still smell it as much now that, because the trailer was just moved to the front recently, right?
Good question.
Today.
What do you think?
Today. So
Yeah,
it
no,
may not
the
be-
complaints. Oh, I'm sorry.
Just one at a time.
It may not be as big as an issue as it was
Well,
prior
yeah,
to.
it's my thought. It's a very subjective thought, but I'm sorry, John, you wanted to weigh in on this?
Yeah, well, I mean, we haven't, it seemed like in conversation with Mr. Pyers and Ms. Wood, Ingrid, that the food smells were centered around a day or two specifically when the air was sort of still and low. And we have not gotten the same level of ongoing complaint. Oh, I smell it again. I smell it again. That sort of died down. And I will note, this is subjective and not meant to be definitive. But every time I'm in town in the middle of the day, I stand off to the side of the landmark closer to town hall and smell, and I have not detected anything out of the ordinary or too prominent. But so I think there were, as Jefferson had alluded, there were some pretty specific weather conditions when we had a still cold, heavy day, where the odor was just there. But it hasn't. I haven't received complaints, and Savannah, you can state also. that this has been hugely persistent and like
All right.
prevalent.
I would
So,
also, sorry to interrupt. I'm sorry, just one thing.
No,
I would
it's
also
okay.
note, like, going forward, if it provides anyone like any sort of consolation, like, we do have in our ordinance that if someone could make a complaint at some point if the odor persists. Section 65.3, number 3. So I just want to point that out.
Thank you. So is everyone comfortable moving to a resolution to approve, subject to approval of the proposed buffer by either our town planner or our town CEO, whoever wants to weigh in on it between the two of you?
Yes, sounds good.
Okay, so I'll make that motion.
And
that
Mr.
we
Ch-
approve the app. John?
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, before you start assembling conditions of approval, I would suggest that the site plan, I would suggest that this commission would approve this subject to an update of the submitted site plan that shows the proposed vegetated buffer along the northwest boundary, as well as removes the legacy elements of the site plan that was used, which was, I believe, like something like a 2006 site plan that shows some circulation arrows from the upper level down to the lower level, and that is not part of this proposal. That was part of a previous application, and there was some questions from the public during the public hearing that wasn't actually, that circulation arrows from the top level to the lower level was not actually part of this proposal. So I would suggest that when the site plan be updated to add the vegetated buffer in an official way, that those circulation directions also be removed.
Okay, let me restate the motion. So I'll make a motion that we accept the application as presented, subject to documentation of the proposed buffer to the satisfaction of either the planning and zoning enforcement agent or the town planner. And all of that information needs to be documented on an updated site plan that removes any legacy elements that are on that proposed site plan to the satisfaction of the town planner.
One second.
John, does that sound good? Okay.
Yeah, that's sufficient.
Any discussion?
No.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? We have just one nay. That's 6. 6 yeas, 6 nays, no abstentions. The motion passes. Okay, next up, it doesn't show up here it is. Under my clip. We have the item, the subdivision application. This is item 7.2. Subdivision application of Charlie Dutch of Dutch Associates and Isaiah Chwanek for subdivision at Old Willimantic Road, map 10, lot 27, zone RA, lot area 7.89. What's your pleasure?
I make a motion to accept.
I'll second.
Any discussion? No. All those in favor?
Aye.
That would be unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sir.
Great job. So we have.
Have a night.
You too. Good night.
Thank you all.
I'm gonna
Is this your
suggest, given how late it is, maybe we don't get into.
You all.
Not discuss the plan of conservation and development or the revisions for the March 10th meeting, unless you feel a need to tonight.
Nope. I agree. Nope.
Okay. Nothing under new business or regulation revisions, nothing to discuss at this time. Justin, you want to hold off until we get through the public hearing?
Let's hold off.
Okay. The communication reports, keep in mind that we're still focused on it's not on the agenda, maybe I shouldn't bring it up, the the Connecticut Bar Association seminar that we've hopefully almost all registered for online for the 22nd, is it? March 22nd.
Yep.
And then anything you want to bring up to us under the communications, John?
No, I have no other communications.
There's the town of Coventry notice public hearing.
Yeah, what's that?
I think that's a regulation change that they don't actually have to refer to us. There's a number of towns that text amendments to zoning are, and what, Mary Kay, I don't know if you want to, if you're digging through to find it. Text amendments for zoning, a number of towns still have the practice of referring those to abutting municipalities, even though that statute was eliminated and changed to referring only to the COG rather than the abutting municipality. It was only, the only thing that's required to be directly referred to an abutting municipality is if there is a large proposed subdivision or large proposed construction use that may affect drainage or traffic patterns in abutting towns. But I believe this is a regulatory change that is actually not a statutorily required referral.
Okay.
So so it's correspondence, but there's really nothing you need to do about it.
Okay, anything under commission open discussion, anyone? Audience of citizens, anyone?
He left.
I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
Second.
Thank you.
Aye.